It's funny because now I'm almost 10 years in and I'm very outgoing and outspoken. But when I first started in PR, people thought I was actually mute, which is which is wild. And I tell anyone this story and they think it's wild, but that's because I was just very quiet. And I mean, you can also chalk that up to being green, but I was so not sure of my place.
We are back for another episode of Have a Map. Today we are joined by Felicia and Emily, who is one of our interns currently. Just kicking it off right away, we're going to talk to Felicia about kind of her journey and her career path in industry, and then Emily's going to ask some questions as well. So getting started right away, Felicia, what did your path look like coming out of high school to where you are now?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It certainly didn't look like this. I kind of wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I always loved fashion, but didn't exactly know the pathways to pursue in terms of getting into the industry. So what I went to university for is actually completely different from what I'm doing right now. It was tricky because I spent 3 out of the 4 years kind of doing everything but what I was studying. So it was actually during a time when Tumblr was coming up, but before Tumblr was real content. It was at a time when people were just reposting things, and that kind of populated and, instituted for a blog. But anyways, it was a funny time because that's when individual websites and again blogs are really coming up. And yeah, I just kind of knew then it was fashion was something that I wanted to pursue. So I actually finished my degree and then I pursued a certificate in public relations. And then that was kind of the origin story for how I got to what I'm doing right now.
So what was it that made you love fashion so much? Was it something about your upbringing or your childhood?
Not really. It was just, I suppose, I kind of came across it later in life. I think my mom was always quite stylish. She was kind of my style icon and who I looked up to, but I never really, other than her, my experiences in later in high school and early in university is kind of when I really started to develop, you know, a passion for style and what clothing could do for people and for your own confidence. So again, it took me a while to kind of figure out what that could look like for me, but PR just kind of landed on my lap.
Yeah, I guess thinking about it, you didn't exactly grow up in the influencer era. You know what I mean? So it's
Definitely
not like you
did not grow up in the influencer era. Everything was old. I mean, I still had magazine subscriptions. I got Vogue every month, and that was major for me. And so everything was still pretty much on paper, and digital was only just coming up. So information was definitely less accessible. So you had to actively seek it. And when you seek it, I think, at least for me, when I was seeking it, I think it became very clear that that was something that I wanted to just immerse myself in.
Mm-hmm. What did you do after you got your certificate in public relations? Did you pursue internships next, or did you go straight for jobs?
Yeah, I did a couple of internships. And I mean, the reality, especially when I was coming up, is you had to do internships. You had to do internships for a long time. Internships weren't paid back then, so you had to work for free. So I was working an internship and then doing 2 other jobs at the same time. I was working as a receptionist at a car dealership, and then I was also waitressing, just to kind of, make sure that I had money at the end of the day. So it was, I mean, now internships are paid, which are great. So, but back then it was a lot. Definitely had to have a lot of energy. So I interned for a long time at an agency and then at a magazine, which was great. And I think that was actually really, really smart because it gave me kind of 2 perspectives. So, what it was like at the client level, and then at the magazine, what it was like from the media perspective. So I think that was a really good move and a really good way to kind of start off the career.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've heard is that the agency route and then the other routes that you can go are so different because I guess just from what I've heard, obviously I'm only going to be a junior in college, but like the work-life balance is a lot different, it seems like.
It's night and day. I mean, even now, I mean, I'm in-house now, so corporate, and I'm only just focusing on one brand. And I think that the reason why I'm able to really do that and do that successfully is because I've had the agency experience. So it's very well-rounded, and I would recommend that for anyone.
Was there anything that you like took away from your earlier internships that you feel like kind of shaped you as you've, gone deeper into your career and found your niche, I guess?
That's a really interesting question. And I mentioned this point specifically to a lot of other individuals that I talk to that are either starting out or, that are mostly just starting out. But for me, it's funny because now I'm almost 10 years in, and I'm very outgoing and outspoken. But when I first started in PR, people thought I was actually mute, which is wild. And I tell anyone this story and they think it's wild, but that's because I was just very quiet. And I mean, you can also chalk that up to being green, but I was so not sure of my place. And especially the places that I worked, I was the only person of color. So it was I felt like kind of I had to almost hide a bit. So obviously with time and experience, I started to come out of my shell a little bit more. But I think kind of having to, at the very beginning, make sure that I stood out in order for me to get those roles or those chances, I think that was very pivotal to kind of where I am right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's one thing that I'm even realizing in this internship, since everything's remote right now, is that the mute button is like really safe. Like,
Yeah,
I can keep myself on mute during a meeting. They're like, "Hi, how are you guys this morning?" And I'm like, but actually, I have to speak up and make myself known to actually like make my mark.
That's such a great point. I mean, in person, you don't have that option, right? And so it's just it's almost kind of it's almost baptism by fire a little bit. You kind of need to figure out your way, and you need to figure it out really fast, or else you're going to lose out on opportunities to other people who are just a little bit more talkative than you are. Even if you know what you're doing, there are so many things that'll kind of separate you from the competition.
Did you, like you said, lose out to people that are more talkative? Did you like learn that the hard way, and then you're like, oh crap, okay, now I gotta be this outgoing person to get what I want?
No, honestly, I lost out to people that were able to work, and to people that were able to do internships longer and for free, for people that could afford to not work. So this is why, because I'm based in Montreal, at the time I was based in Toronto, things have changed now where interns have to get paid. So that's great. But it was a really really interesting way to kind of weed out the individuals that couldn't sustain themselves working for free for so long. Because if you had someone who could do an internship for a year and a half, because they didn't have to work, they didn't have all these other things going on after that 9 to 5, their chances and their visibility are, their chances of getting in are just a lot higher than for a permanent role. There are a lot higher than yours.
Yeah, I guess then you can kind of move up on the ladder as people know, like, oh, they were so committed and worked for 1-2 years unpaid, then they know that you'll go for another thing in that same place.
Yeah, exactly.
So what was, after you had your internships, you said, what was your first step, like I guess outside of internships? Did you stay in the agency route, or did you go to like the in-house thing that you're doing now?
My first role was in-house at a shoe company, actually. DSW. It was,
oh yeah.
It was when DSW was actually coming into Canada. So at the time it was called Town Shoes. Now it's DSW owned. But yeah, that was my first stint in PR. And again, like, it was such a great environment, but I also felt like I had other things to learn, and I didn't want to pigeonhole myself, because I knew very early on that fashion was the route that I wanted to go in. But I also knew that if that was the lane that I wanted to stay in, I needed to expose myself to other industries as well. So I started at Town Shoes, left, and then went to an agency. And from there, I was doing home decor, other lifestyle. For a long time, I was repping this industrial spray paint company, which is not sexy by any means, but I mean, it gives you perspective, right? So yeah, I was able to kind of experiment again with different industries and see what that was like. So I guess throughout the, I mean, I'm almost 10 years in now, but throughout the middle, I spent a good chunk of time um, at two very different agencies that just provided different experiences because of the various clients that we had. So I was really, really, I feel in a really good position to kind of now settle into what I'm doing more permanently because I was able to kind of go around the block and experience um, the different side of different industries.
What made you get to like where you are now? I guess like was it a connection and someone was like, "Oh, this job opened up at it's Aldo, right? That's where you are now."
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, like I mentioned, I'm based in Canada, so not a lot of global fashion companies are based in Canada. So this role opened up, and I actually had a friend who I interned with at the beginning of my career, who was at the company, and she kind of made the connection for me. But um, yeah, it was just something that I knew it was a very rare opportunity. So I knew that I had to kind of jump into it. It's funny because I'm originally from Toronto. The head office is in Montreal. So I had to move for the job, which was fun. I love the city and it was great, but it was almost a little nutty because I had gotten married back in 2018. And then 1 month later, I had to move to Montreal without my husband because he had to tie up some, yeah, he had to tie up some loose ends back in Toronto. So it was like, okay, we're married, peace out, see you in January. But it was really interesting. And I mean, Montreal isn't too far from Toronto. It's only about a 5 hour drive, 1 hour flight, but it was a bit of a nutty time, but yeah, definitely worth the pursuit.
I guess the one benefit of that is that if you're living in the city alone for what, like 2, 3 months or something like that, then you get to really dive into your work and with your new
Exactly.
role.
Exactly. And it's Montreal, they speak French here, and my French is not good. So
Same,
it
mine's
was
terrible.
it's okay as long as you have a base. That's
Mm.
fine. It's you can work on it. But that's exactly it. Like I was really able to dive into my work and really focus on that. So once my husband kind of finally joined me, that's when we were able to have a little bit more fun and kind of explore the city.
Did you notice anything different, like that was fundamentally different about the way that like they encouraged you to work or the way that you work at Aldo than your previous like positions?
I mean, it's a global company, so I think even
Yeah.
just the changing your mental shift to think on a global level. When I was at my agencies, it was always ever, okay, from the Canadian perspective. Um, but again, for where I am right now, we have dealings and we have storefronts all over the world. So it was really just kind of changing that mental shift a little bit. And I think that it was great. And I think having that background in everything else and kind of having done and experienced multiple industries kind of really helped with that. Because although it was, again, from a Canadian perspective, I was still kind of able to integrate some ideas from different sectors that you wouldn't necessarily would think would apply to fashion, but you never know because when you have that insight, it just, oftentimes things just cross over and it can make sense.
Since it is global, have you gotten to like travel a bit? Obviously pre-COVID, like for your work.
I was traveling so much. It's insane. When I think about it
Yeah.
now, I'm like, wow, it was nuts. We would, I think, yeah, we would be in New York 2 to 3 times a year, LA twice a year, London twice a year, Toronto a couple of times a year. It was, I think that there was even one point where we were entertaining the idea of going to the UAE. So that, I mean, and then COVID happened. So it was a lot of travel, and it was really, really nice. And now that if I think about traveling, I can't even picture it, but um, it was really, really special to kind of be able to be in market and to connect with all those individuals face to face. Cause um, as you know, or as I'm sure you'll find out in PR, it's the relationships are your bread and butter. And, an email or a phone call or a Zoom meeting will only kind of take you so far, but really just having that in-person access and that those in-person conversations will really help and make a difference at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's one thing that everyone tells me, like my, public relations professors and like people I've spoken to that are working it, they're always like, the connections are so important, make all these connections. And I sit here and I'm like, I'm so scared. Like, what if I do it wrong? Like, what if I'm accidentally say the wrong thing, slip on my words? But I guess you just figure it out.
But there's no way that you can do it wrong, because if
Mm.
everyone kind of started where you're at right now, so everyone knows what it's like to kind of be starting out. And I guarantee you, if you reach out to anyone, whether it be on LinkedIn or Instagram, like they would be open to having a conversation with you, because they've been there and they've done that. So, don't be shy and don't worry about slipping up your words. They'll totally understand.
Yeah, that's one thing I've heard. It's like the coffee chats. Like, I think I just got to rip off the Band-Aid and be like, hey, want to talk on the phone or something like that.
Totally do it. Totally do it.
So what's your day-to-day like at work, like right now, I guess, because COVID probably shifted things? Like, is it mostly Zoom, or are you getting back into in-person at all?
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, the COVID situation in Montreal kind of changes often. So we are still very much working from home. So it's May right now, and usually we would kind of be in New York and LA around this time, kind of just previewing for fall, and in Toronto. But right now we're really just kind of gearing up for our fall campaign. And so we are now, I mean, it's May now, but by the time this airs, I think it's going to be August. But we're already kind of looking at travel and reigniting in real life events and what that's going to look like for us. So right now it's kind of just planning and strategizing for fall. But I mean, day to day just looks so different, which is the fun part about PR, is that it always just varies, which is really nice because it keeps you on your toes. But the Billboard Music Awards are happening tonight, actually. So, we were even looking at a couple of celebrity placements this week and kind of just getting the brand on some celebs. We're coming out of award season, so it was very kind of celebrity heavy. But right now it's really just focusing on kind of what that shift back into in real life events is going to look like for fall. So again, really just kind of strategizing what that big picture is going to be like for August, September, and even holiday.
Yeah, I bet that's obviously such a pressing not issue, but just matter, because like half of your advertising and all that is from, giving the shoes to an influencer who then posts about your brand event and all that different stuff. So it's like so important to bring back.
Well, I mean, our social team, so kind of just how we're structured at the company, is the PR and social team, they're under the same umbrella. So we actually view those two things, celebrity and influencer, very, very differently. But that's, I mean, yeah, it is an interesting point. It's a new way for us to kind of just get that brand awareness out there, because, we had all of these opportunities like award season and street style moments that are just kind of popping up not out of thin air, but they're popping up more and more because, people are trying to be seen and they're trying to reintegrate into regular life. So it's really just an interesting time to kind of test and react what that'll look like with our customers.
One's kind of broad, but like, what would be, just because I'm honestly curious, what's like one of the projects that you've worked on or campaigns that you've worked on that you're most proud of, or you look back on and you, I guess, reminisce on the most positively?
Oh, I would say Aldo, we launched our Love Planet collection. We launched a sustainable sneaker actually almost 3 years ago now. And we've launched a full collection since, but I think that Aldo's Love Planet collection is really kind of something that's important to me, obviously, because it's very just helpful to the planet. And, it's something as a company, sustainability, that we prioritize at every level. So it's really just been interesting and fun to be part of that evolution into becoming a company that is more sustainably mindful in every way. So to me, I think that would be it for me. I mean, there's tons of other cool things, but if I truly think long term and impact, it would be Aldo Love Planet for me.
That must be a good feeling knowing that, you know, the company and the group of people that you're pouring like your heart and soul, blood, sweat, and tears into is making a good impact on the planet and not doing, you know, like shady things in the industry. And you're actually like proud to say, oh, I work at Aldo.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's wild. Our company values are love, integrity, and respect. So those are 3 filters that we honestly apply to everything that we do as a business. And I've never encountered that in my career. And it's really just something special to kind of be a part of.
What's like, I guess, I'm not asking like what's your worst thing that's happened, but when things, you know, get tough, like what's something that motivates you to keep going work-wise? Or even if it's just outside of work, something that motivates you, I guess.
You know, it's funny because I think if you would have asked me this question 5 years ago, I would have just been like, I'm just a different person now after having done this for almost a decade. And the funniest thing that someone ever told me was it's PR, not ER. And obviously just with the nature of the business and kind of, it's so 24/7. You always feel like there's an urgency to it. And sometimes there is, but I think the best thing or the biggest thing that's helped me is kind of just taking a step back, and whether that's physically taking a step back from my computer and not looking at the screen, or going for a walk, and just kind of taking a moment when kind of things seem a little bit intense. That really just kind of puts things into perspective.
Mhm. So how do you, I guess, because you said like sometimes you have to take the step back and realize that work, you know, isn't everything, and sometimes you have to prioritize other things. How do you like practice self-care in your daily life?
I cook a lot. I eat a lot, and I mean, I live in a city that is known for great food, and so that's really, really helpful. Um, but mostly it's just been oh my God, this is embarrassing, but BTS, have you heard of BTS? Yeah. So if I'm not eating a pizza to kind of chill out or something, or making a pizza to kind of chill out, I'm watching like BTS YouTube videos, which is insane because I'm a 33-year-old woman, and you know, it's fine. But yeah, they've brought me a lot of joy this pandemic.
I haven't gotten into them yet. I feel like I'll probably get there eventually, but I know one of my friends who moved, she went to some pop-up in LA for them where they were selling a bunch of merch, and she bought like $200 worth of stuff that was all
Oh, that's it.
BTS themed.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's good for her. Practicing
Yeah.
restraint. I would say if you're looking into them though, like dedicate a good day. You will go down a hole. There's no coming out. So just make sure you have the time.
Good to know. So, what is your work-life balance like these days? Like, has COVID kind of allowed you to, I guess, take the time that you need away from things after such a lot of travel, like you said?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing with work-life balance is that it's not really just up to the individual, unfortunately.
Mhm.
It's very much up to, you know, where you work and your employer and your direct manager and the team that we have right now and at Aldo. And they're just, the company in general just really prioritizes work-life balance. So I have been very fortunate to really, even just from the beginning, um, before COVID even went down, work-life balance was always a priority, and it's always been great here. So you know, obviously there are times where it's busy, it's a busy season, especially when we were traveling, but um I think that that's just something that's part and parcel with the industry. Like, you'll have your moments. There will be seasons where it's just really busy, or there will be seasons where it's really quiet. um but to be honest, it's, yeah, work life balance is not something that I really had to worry about here. It's just kind of come naturally, which is really nice.
That's nice. That's something that I hope I find. Obviously, in the beginning, you know, you kind of have to like suffer to get where you want to be for a bit. Um, but I hope that I find somewhere like that that like values their employees so much.
Yeah, it's a very lucky kind of place to be in.
Hmm. So what do you, this is another like broad one, but I just think it's kind of fun. What do you feel is like your current impact on the world with your career?
Broad and deep. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's great. Um, I think that I'm really able to tell the story of Aldo in kind of the truest way possible. I think when you're at an agency, um, you're working with so many different clients at once. I think at one point my client list was at 9. And so you can know a brand inside and out, but it really is different kind of being in-house and really focusing on one brand. And since kind of coming into this organization, I've I've just learned so much about kind of the people that have founded it, the city which it was founded, and again, I mentioned our values earlier, and I think really just taking those elements and showing the world that Aldo is more than just um, a footwear retailer. It's so much more. Has really been a great experience because it's the history is so deep and there's so many ways that you can tell a story. And I think at the end of the day, PR people, they're just storytellers, right? But um it's all in how you tell that story. And I think that it's just, again, I've been really fortunate to be with a company that has a rich history, that has great values, that's also just doing really cool shit. So it, the story possibilities are endless.
That's cool to hear. That's something that, I haven't thought about because I haven't had to think about it yet, but I like that perspective on it.
Yeah.
So you said a couple minutes ago, you were like, yeah, I'm a whole different person career-wise now than I was 10 years ago. So what do you think, like, in your perspectives has changed in the way that you think about things?
I mean, time, obviously, and just experience, and a lot of experimentation in terms of just figuring out with myself what my limits are, or what working with different clients is like, and what works for different clients. And a lot of the times I feel like there's like a confidence almost that you need to have with PR, and I absolutely did not have that confidence when I started out, but it kind of, I have it now, but because I was able to kind of put in the time and kind of, again, like test my limits either with myself or with my clients and see what works, and really just understanding the industry and observing. Like, I'm also a master observer is what I like to say. I'll notice everything. And I think as as a PR person, because you're so used to kind of being behind the scenes, it just comes second nature. But yeah, I'm sorry, I kind of went off track. What was your question again?
It was like how your perspectives has changed, but I feel like you've basically
Okay, yeah, there you go.
gotten there.
That's how my perspective is. Yeah. And the only thing that I will add to that is, with kind of the pandemic and everything that's happened so far, it just, I think just in general, like, it's put so many things into perspective, and just how you're going to go about life, and just connections, and making those connections and nurturing those connections, because um, those are just such, connections mean different things now
Mhm.
after this pandemic. So I think I'm just a little bit more mindful about what it takes to kind of maintain a connection.
Is there like a piece of advice that you would have given to like career-minded Felicia like 10 years ago, like besides, put yourself out there and be confident, like you said?
Maybe don't doubt yourself too much. Like, I think
Mhm.
that, yeah, if I were to tell 23-year-old Felicia something, it would be, don't doubt yourself too much, but also network as much as possible,
Mhm.
read as much as possible, just absorb as much information as possible, no matter who you're talking to, whether it's a friend, a professor, or another intern. You um, can always learn something from someone. So just listen, and you never know what you might get.
Mhm. Is there this one? I'm just because you had mentioned that you are constantly consuming information and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Is there anyone's like PR strategy or marketing strategy or their social media, the way that they do things that you would really admire, like brand wise, that you follow?
Um.
Because I know I'm like a huge fan of, I don't know if you know them, the Mayfair Group. They're like PR, they're small, based out of Arizona, and they're just kind of the way that they do things so creatively and it's so original.
Yeah.
I am like glued. I have their post notifications on and I'm not even buying the sweatshirts just because I love to see their work.
Oh, that's a hot tip. Okay, I'll start following them. But yeah, I mean, in terms of kind of who's sitting out right now, it's really tricky, because I think that the pandemic was a level set for everyone. So even if you were doing cool stuff pre-pandemic, how people have kind of adapted and pivoted during is really what people are looking at right now. So Macaj, I'm a really big fan of what they're doing right now. And they're another Canadian brand. So I think that they're really dope. And I mean, yeah, obviously this is biased, but Aldo, like we're doing really
Yeah.
cool stuff. Beauty Counter, which is a clean brand
Mhm.
based out of California. Really big fan of them and kind of how they've innovated. But I mean, it's kind of everyone's just really experimenting right now and trying to um, find their foothold in kind of the new industry and the new reality of retail kind of post COVID. So yeah, I mean, if I had to name 3 or 2 brands, it would be those 2, but everyone's kind of really doing cool stuff right now.
Yeah, that's one thing I kind of picked up onto is like that everyone a year before the pandemic, it kind of seemed like everyone was doing the same thing. I mean, obviously people are doing different things and different strategies and different products and content. But I think because COVID really threw everyone for such a loop, people had to get so creative. And now, like huge brands that probably laughed at TikTok 4 years ago are posting on TikTok 3 times a day, like stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. TikTok for sure. I mean, that's a whole other beast. But yeah, I mean, it's not a sink or swim situation. I think it goes just back to making a connection. I think that people are more just mindful about where they're buying and why. And I think in order to do that, you need to, not to sound like a broken record, but make a genuine connection. And
Mhm.
the brands that are going to succeed are the brands that are, they're not just selling fashion, they're selling an idea, they're selling a lifestyle, they're supporting social injustice causes. It's not just about fashion anymore. It's about everything.
Mhm. So I guess kind of my wrap up question is like for someone that literally wants to be you, like me, like what, tip would you give them or piece of advice that you haven't really given already, if there is anything?
Mm, you mentioned the coffee chats kind of earlier, and I think that
Mm.
that is really important. Really don't be shy to kind of reach out to people and ask to have those conversations, even if you're not really sure what you want to talk about, kind of picking their brain and like getting 20 minutes of FaceTime or Zoom time just to kind of understand their path and what they've done and what's helped them is going to help you immensely. um, Having a mentor too, I think, is going to be really beneficial for someone who's just starting out. I didn't really hop into the mentor train until half midway into my career, um, and that's fine, better late than never. But I think really networking and having a mentor that you can kind of just bounce ideas off of or do gut checks with is really important.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that because, me, I'm in like Richmond, Virginia, and I go to school in Southwest Virginia where it's woods all around me. Like I'm not getting to go meet people in person or anything. So I
Yeah,
appreciate you talking with me today, definitely.
of course. I mean, like if you want to chat anytime, hit me up.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, I think this conversation was super insightful. Before I ask the last question that we always ask everyone on the podcast, I just realized I never introduced myself. I know the screen says I'm Mamadou Njai. I am not Mamadou Njai. My name is Cheyenne. I am an intern manager here at Dim Events, and I'm also in PR. So it's kind of why I'm helping to facilitate today. But yeah, the last question that we ask every intern and guest that comes on the podcast, and I know we kind of touched on it before, is who are you currently listening to right now? So I know we discussed BTS before.
The BTS for sure.
If you got anybody else that you want to touch upon?
Um,
Here.
I can go first if you need
yeah,
a second to think since you're on
yeah,
the BTS train.
yeah.
Mine, I don't even think, well, I could do music and kind of a podcast because that's listening. But so Olivia Rodrigo's new album just came out and it kind of threw me for a loop because I thought it was going to be, I don't know, like my summer anthems. And then it ended up being really sad songs. So there's a few of those that I'm liking. But podcast wise, I'm really liking this podcast called What We Said podcast, where it's these 2 girls who live in LA. One of them is an entrepreneur and one of them is a holistic health coach who's like certified, and they just give advice. Like girls send in questions to their email and they give like really insightful answers to everything, and I feel like it's really kind of changing my outlook on things. So yeah,
I haven't heard of that one. I'll definitely look that up.
it's really good.
I'm sorry to disappoint. I'm only exclusively listening to BTS right now. Like they just launched, or they just debuted their newest single a couple of days ago, and I have issues, so it's exclusively BTS right now. In terms of podcasts, The Daily is a really good one. If you guys haven't heard of that one, from the New York Times, really consumable and bite-sized information based on kind of what's going on in the world today. And then Crime Junkie. Just if you haven't heard of that one either, and you're really into crime and murder kind of listening to that stuff, yeah, that one's really good, and really into that.
Awesome. Well, I think with that, I want to thank Emily and of course Felicia for coming on today and sharing all this wonderful insight into the PR industry. I definitely learned a lot, and I think Emily took a lot of it away from it too. So yeah, I just want to thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.